this team. That would be $50 fine. How about at the end down there? Yes. Here's Samson.
Hey, Stephen.
Sam, how you doing?
Hey, Senator Jackson, how are you?
Fine. How you doing?
Mr. Chairman? All right, we'll go ahead and call Subcommittee, Appropriations Subcommittee 4 to order. Department of Public Safety, just housekeeping, we will have Department of Corrections next week. For whatever reason, couldn't be here today, so the plan is that they will appear at this subcommittee next week. And so I'm going to turn it over to the Commissioner and for your presentation, and just would like to hear a little bit about the where driver's license stand. I know I certainly haven't gotten the calls that I was, which is a good thing. So however you want to put that into your presentation. Turn that, I think it needs to be turned up, yeah.
There we go. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Chairman Hobson, for the opportunity to come present to y'all some of our ask and requests for DPS. As it pertains to driver's license services, as you well know, last session, y'all did some realignment when it came to the Driver Services Bureau. One of those things included the removal of Mississippi Highway Patrol from overseeing and administering the Driver's License Service Bureau. As part of that, and as part of our request, one of the things that we're in the process of doing is creating a new management structure for the Driver's License Service Bureau. We have gone before the Personnel Board, and they are accepting of how we wish to structure it, which would basically mean that we need a new director for the Driver's Services Bureau. We will have regional directors that will do the Southern District, Central District, and Northern District, as well as some directors that will be immediately below the director here in Jackson. And then we'll have station managers. I want to say that there was roughly 28 troopers assigned to the Driver Services Bureau, and in total, there will be a cost savings as it pertains to driver services, because obviously the fringe that goes along with the troopers is more than there are with just regular state employees. So we will see a cost savings. That's not a cost savings for the entire agency. That's for the Driver Services Bureau. The reality is that the troopers will be placed into other positions within Highway Patrol. So we'll still be having to pay those salaries. It's just they'll be given other job duties. And so Driver Services will have its own management structure, its own director, and we feel like ultimately that's going to be a better thing for Driver Services. One of the things that we've tried to emphasize, and I know from my time here, and I'm sure y'all have all heard it, is everybody wants a driver service station in their county, and that would be great if we could do that, but that would be an astronomical cost. So one of the things that I've tried to emphasize to members as I talk to them about that very issue is that going forward with driver services, we're looking to expand our digital footprint and minimize our physical footprint. We'll be looking towards larger, more regional stations that can, if somebody needs to come in, there will be plenty of opportunities and plenty of lines in which they can be serviced in a quick and efficient manner. Part of that would also, in my vision, and we're working on a pilot program, would be virtual examiners. You know, as it stands now, the legislation calls for kiosks to be used, and that was a great product in early 2000. Everybody was amazed with kiosk. But I think kiosk ultimately will go the way of ATMs, and people will be using these devices to transfer money, and you really won't see folks going to the ATMs like they have in the past. And I feel like it'll be the same way with kiosk. What we want to do is set up a virtual examiner and have a computer terminal in every courthouse where somebody that doesn't have internet or Wi-Fi at home could sit down, and the DPS web page would pop up, and they could go to the Driver Services Bureau if they have any questions or need any help. You'll actually have somebody from a call center that pops on their screen to help them work through the process. And so we'll have virtual examiners that will do that. We also look to go to a central print. We're one of 3 states that actually hands out driver's licenses at the stations now. Most other states
Wait,
have
I'm
gone.
sorry, we're one of only 3 states
We're
that
one of
do
only
that?
3 states that still, when you go there, you get your driver's license. Other states, you'll get a printed card of some sort, or just a regular card stock, or basically a receipt that says this is your temporary driver's license. Then they mail you your official driver's license. There's a cost savings with that, and there's a security benefit to that as well, because as it stands now with Real ID, that card stock, if it got in the wrong hands, could be used to make fake IDs, and terrorists and other folks would love to get their hands on them. And so when you keep it centralized, there's less opportunity for theft, and then that getting into the wrong hands, and there is a cost savings to it. And so we look to do that in the future as well. And obviously what you've seen here recently with the appointment system, which has helped alleviate a lot of the line problems we were having. It didn't take me long or my staff long to realize that it's hard to catch up with a long line. When the long line starts building at 5 o'clock a.m., by 8 o'clock it's wrapped around the building. It's going to take you to at least the afternoon to work through that line. And what we found is if you came at 4 o'clock, you wouldn't have to wait. But so many people were just getting there before 8 that it created these long lines. The appointment system has gone ahead and, for lack of a better word, flattened the curve, if you will, and spread out those appointments throughout the day so that when people get there, they're not having to wait. And so we've had a lot of success with that. With that has come some additional cost. You know, the people that develop the program don't do it for free. And so we've had to incur those costs. And I'll let Stephen talk a little bit about the finances of it, but we do have a lump sum, I want to say it's about $2 million expenditure that's owed to Indemnia. And they're the ones that do a lot of our Real ID compliance and Real ID functions. They're also the ones that we're looking to for guidance going forward to create the mobile ID that y'all also put in statute that we shall have. And so we're trying to work with them, and then we'll have to send it out for procurement, but that will be, at least in the short term, an expense to get there. Now, we're hoping that's something that we can divert on to the consumers that want to take advantage of mobile ID. Mobile ID can be a great tool. It'll be something that people, much like we talked about the ATMs earlier and people using PayPal or Venmo, you'll be able to use your mobile ID to verify who you are. It also has some security functions for law enforcement. As they approach the car, they'll be able to Bluetooth into that person's phone if they'll allow him, and go ahead and get all their identifier information so that law enforcement will know who they're dealing with when they're approaching to write a ticket. So there are some benefits that we're excited about. It'll make the renewal process easier. People will be able to take their own photo instead of having to come into a driver's license station. If you're like my wife, I'm sure you are, Senator Wiggins, you probably take 1,000 pictures until you get the perfect one for your driver's license.
I don't do that. I don't know what you're talking about.
But there will be some benefits to it. And I'm going to let Stephen talk a little bit about the finances that we're looking at when it comes to driver services, because he's he's our Deputy Commissioner of Finance, and he's certainly more knowledgeable about the details of that. I will say there are some additional funds that we're requesting, and on some of these additional funds, it's things that y'all have asked us to do or come up with. We're just telling you what it's going to cost to do them, and if the money's not there, it's just things that we might not be able to do at this juncture. So I'll let him explain some of that.
Good morning.
Morning.
So as the commissioner was mentioning, with the implementation of some of these changes to driver services, they are going to come with some increased cost to the program. We've been working with Deputy Commissioner Keith Davis on trying to identify what these costs are going to be. Some of them are projections, since we haven't gone down this trail before. This is our first time out with this scenario. Through conversations with him and looking at the restructure of the organization, as of today, we were looking at needing around $5 million for the implementation of the new personnel and the new structure, along with the equipment and the travel and so forth of items that are going to be coming along with the new reporting structure for driver services. In addition to that, there has been some added cost for cloud storage and backup space that is now being billed to DPS that has not been previously billed to DPS. That's costing us, this year is going to cost us about a little over $100,000 a month. If you annualize it, it comes up just short of 1.5 million, and that's actually less than what it originally was. So in addition to the personnel, we're now also paying these charges that are being passed through to us from ITS. So that puts us closer to 6.5 million for services there. And then the lump sum payment that the commissioner was referring to currently with Ademia, that's working on our driver's license services and the software and equipment that runs our stations. We've been in a test phase with them on their on all their software and their equipment for about 2 years. At the point that we signed off on leaving the test phase, we're given a 1-year warranty period. And at the end of that warranty period, we owe $2 million to them. So in October of next year, we're going to owe a lump sum payment of $2 million that we're going to need to be able to fund. Thereafter, there's a $750,000 annual maintenance fee that we have to pay for the software. Much of that maintenance fee will be paid for through the card charges that are charged to the users, to the citizens that go and get a driver's license. There's a $6 fee associated with the card payments that's part of the 24 for a 4-year license. And most of that goes back to Ademia to pay for the actual cards themselves and the technology behind them, but a portion of that stays with DPS, and that's what we can use to pay for the annual maintenance charges. But the $2 million retainage fee, right now those card fees will not cover that $2 million that's due in September. So if we don't receive a specific appropriation for that, we'll have to find it somewhere else internally to pay that cash. And with regards to the implementation of driver services, that's the bulk of what we're looking at.
Okay. Yeah. Y'all can go on, and if there's questions at the end, I'll turn them over to the members.
Okay. And as you know, Senator, or Mr. Chairman, with DPS's budget, it's not like it's just one agency. I mean, we have a lot of different divisions. So that's just the Driver Services Bureau that technically doesn't even really exist now, but will exist after July 1st. The other parts of our budget.
Well, let me say this. So what I'm hearing is, hey, we've asked y'all to fix it, and you're saying we're fixing it, but it's going to cost some money.
It's going to cost some money.
I mean, that's our job, but yeah.
Well, and it's what came up when they talked about removing the highway patrol from there. We knew that a new management structure would have to be put in place, and without that management structure in place, it's just too big and it's too large to be managed without it. And I think customer service would suffer in the long run if we're not able to have directors and regional directors overseeing what's going on. And one of the things that I've tried to emphasize, and I know Commissioner Davis has too, is when we're dealing with our driver services station, one of the things that we've worked really, really hard on is trying to change the customer service aspect within the station. And that's a goal that we need to continue to work on going forward. But in order to do that, it has to be a top-down management situation. And it has to be a situation where when people call, I mean, even now, I'm disappointed with our call center. People call, it's either busy or the phone doesn't get answered at all because we just don't have enough people that can answer those calls. And so, either we got to start utilizing technology and say, hey, we're going to give you kind of some form answers, or we're going to do like the, punch 1 for this, punch 2 for that. But eventually, folks want to talk to somebody on the other end of the line, and that's where we want to improve our customer service. So yes, y'all have asked for these things. We want to do them. We're going to try to get there. Would y'all want us to answer questions about specific divisions, or do you want us just to keep kind of going through the budget?
Just the general budget, and I was noticing what the LBR was versus your request, so talk about that. And then it's my understanding that you have a deficit request. If you'll talk about the deficit request as well.
Okay, well, let's start off with the deficit request, and I'll let Stephen talk about that.
You'll have to forgive me, I didn't bring the request letter with me this morning, but.
Well, I got it right here. I think that's all of it, right? Or just this one? Yeah, for driver services, 625,000 for driver services. Let's see. I don't know if but then you went into the trooper school and the multi-purpose training facility. So is all of that part of your deficit request?
Yes, sir, that is part of the deficit
So all
request.
of this is your deficit letter.
Sir.
Okay, so that's all part of your deficit request.
It is. So for the Mississippi Highway Patrol Cadet Class 65, right now we're on track to begin that class at the end of February, 1st of March, and graduate at the 1st of June. That class, we're hoping to graduate 40 troopers. That would be a starting number of 75 cadets to begin the training, with hopefully 40 graduating. What we asked for in the deficit request is we asked to receive the $1.52 million of capital expense funds that we lapsed at the end of FY20. Those funds were provided for Cadet Class 64, and there was about $4.5 million, I believe, that was originally given to DPS for that class, and there was 1.5 left at the end of the year, and so DPS lapsed that back to the capital expense fund. We're asking to receive that to be able to help fund Cadet Class 65 in part. The other 1.5 that is associated with that, DPS has a fund called the Highway Patrol Trooper School Fund that was created in 2019. That fund receives money from the Insurance Verification Fund at the end of every fiscal year. Currently, DPS has cash in that fund that we can use to help apply towards the school, but we need the spending authority in order to do it. So the 1.5 of spending authority is cash we already have. We're just asking for the authority to spend it. Then the multi-purpose training facility, and the $4 million. This one is related to, originally came up as a result of a contract that DPS entered into with the National Rifle Association. Through that agreement, we agreed to provide certain facilities to host an annual national shooting championship. And one of those facilities was a multi-purpose facility in which much of the event could be staged in and through. That was the original kind of genesis of that conversation, but that multi-purpose training facility is really needed on site of the training academy for other purposes rather than just the NRA event. We have numerous trainings and other agencies that come through the training academy in Pearl that we're starting to have to turn away because we have people in quarantine. We have classes in quarantine out there. We don't have enough space. We've within the past month, we've become aware of a drainage issue we have on campus that's causing one of the building's walls and windows to start falling out. So we're going to have to shut off half the campus, or at least some of the campus dormitories, and it's going to reduce the amount of training that we can actually host out there. The facilities as a whole need repair and renovation, but this multi-purpose training facility would be used in large part for various trainings such as active shooter, defensive tactics, classroom trainings. We lend our facilities out to other state and local and federal law enforcement agencies as well that would be using that training space. It's
Okay,
about,
and then the forensics lab, and we talked about driver services.
sure, the forensics lab, 335,000. That would be to hire investigators that would assist local coroners with going out and conducting investigations of deaths that occur in their jurisdictions. The attempt here, and the commissioner will be able to elaborate on this, but the attempt there is to help speed up some of the backlog that we've had at the forensics lab. And 335,000 would be for part of a year to hire these investigators to get them started. And then the Driver Services Bureau, $625,000. This is the beginning of the implementation of the new structure for driver services. Along with the 625, we're looking for 10 new pins and reclassification of some of the people that we have there now to get them in line with State Personnel Board recommendations of their salaries.
So by my rough count, about an $8.5 million deficit request.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, how about for FY '21, your budget request?
I'm sorry, go ahead. I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry, your budget request for 21,
Okay.
22, sorry.
For 22, yes, sir. Well, and going into a little bit about what we were talking about with the medical examiner's office, as you know, and I know, and everybody that's been dealing with it knows, there's been an issue there for years. We finally got to 3 pathologists. We're now down to 2 working pathologists, medical examiners at the crime lab. One of the issues that we've had and we've seen and we've heard from local police departments and sheriff's offices and district attorneys, we had one doctor, Dr. Davis, was a medical examiner for the state. Well, he's moved to Utah. To get him to come back and actually testify at trials is $5,000 to $7,000 a trial, if you can get him back here. So one of the things that we came up with, and other states have done it, and the pathologists that work for us at the ME's office, they think it's a good idea as well. Mississippi is a coroner system, and you've got some really good coroners in the state, and you've got some that might not be really good witnesses in the district attorney's minds to put on trial in a murder case as to cause of death. We would like to be able to have some in-house death investigators that would assist with the autopsy and the coroners at the scene. And the goal would be to have these individuals available and sign off on the autopsy report, that so should a doctor not be able to offer the trial testimony, the death investigator would also be able to come in and offer testimony as to the cause of death. And Senator, in a number of cases, I mean, somebody gets shot 7 times and there's 2 witnesses. The cause of death is pretty evident, but we still need an expert or somebody to come in and offer some opinion testimony as to the cause of death. So that's what these death investigators would do. The goal would also be that instead of our medical examiners having to take time out from the office where they're doing the autopsy and having to go testify for 2 or 3 days in South Mississippi or North Mississippi, that in most cases they would actually be able to stay in their office, keep doing autopsies, and we could send these death investigators to go out and offer the trial testimony needed in those cases. We have a backlog at the ME's office, and it's something that we're going to work through. We're trying to utilize these death investigators to work through that backlog so that the doctors themselves can focus on getting the autopsies and the autopsy reports done. We're also have asked for some exclusions from some of the procurement requirements when it comes to getting contracts for contract pathologists to do autopsies. We have to go through the same bid and procurement process, so we've asked for some exemptions from that so that we can do those quicker. But in all, you're looking at about $3,300,000 in increase in general funds for the forensic lab. $1.2 million of that would be for salary realignment. $800,000 would be for death investigators, and about 1.3 for funding operations as they exist today, because what has been happening at the crime lab is they haven't been able to meet their own budget needs, so we've been taking money from other funds to pay everything at the crime lab. One of the things that we really want to do and get back to is painting a very clear picture to y'all and to us on where our money's being spent. I think there's been a history of moving money around to pay deficits in different divisions out of the bigger divisions' budgets. And I think it'll paint a clearer picture for y'all where we are if we can get all that realigned so you can see how much each division is actually spending. Bureau of Narcotics, we requested an additional $1.3 million for NBN. That's to hire and equip 7 new agents. I think we went through a lot of that at the hearing back in August. Public safety and planning, we're asking for an additional $155,000 increase in general funds. The director's salary we think should be 100% state funds, and give him the ability to hire a deputy director. Public safety and planning oversees a lot of federal money, and if it's not monitored and done correctly, then we'll have to pay that money back. The state will, and so we need to have some help over there to make sure that we continue doing what they've done. We just got off probationary status with some of the federal programs, and I'll say Ray Sims has been doing a really good job over there. Homeland Security, we were asking for $340,000 in additional funds. Y'all passed the School Safety Act a while back. It required regional coordinators for school safety. We appreciate that. There was three new pins, but we don't have any money for it. So that would be $340,000 to cover that. On the enforcement side, going forward, MHP would need about a $3.3 million to cover the salaries for the new troopers. We do think some of that would be offset with the anticipated retirement of troopers, but it's hard to, 3.3 million? Yes. And I would, and keeping in mind that, again, there will be some retirees, but it's impossible for us to predict that number. And so we're trying to get that aligned with what we anticipate the graduating class to be. Also would like to point out that, part of the trooper salary, the fringe is about 70 or 80% because there's a 50% match that we have to pay to PERS for the trooper's retirement. And so, that's one of the reasons why that number gets so large. Again, Melota, the governor has requested a $3 million increase in general funds for Melota for salaries and personnel to replace the troopers that we have out there and allow other folks to get hired and also to upgrade the facilities. The Mississippi Law Enforcement Training Academy is the state's law enforcement training academy. There are regional ones put on by a variety of sheriffs. We feel like the one for the state ought to be the premier one for our whole state. And I know monies have been given to different law enforcement academies across the state, and we feel like some of that needs to be redirected back to Melota so that we can improve the facilities. We'd love to take y'all on a tour. There's cracks in the window that wide where everything's settling. There's drainage issues and a number of other things. One of the things that we would ask is to come out underneath 2623, which, like when Wildlife and Fisheries goes there and sends their agents, we can't necessarily bill them like you used to be able to do for sending their cadets there. So if we can come out underneath that and bill them like we would the local sheriffs when they send cadets, we think that would be a benefit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me follow up on a few things that were discussed, Commissioner. One is on the driver's license. You and I have talked a little bit about this too, but on the restructuring of the program to make it more efficient. Obviously, that's a good thing, and it's needed. You mentioned the regional directors and all of that. Are there ways to help as we start going to more technology, increasing digital footprint to help save on some of the physical locations so we can offset some of the increased costs?
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a hard pill for some legislators to swallow, but, we have a driver's license service station in Picayune and we have one in Kill. They're 20 minutes apart and they're both very small stations. And yes, they serve the communities or in that immediate area, which is a benefit. But at the same token, there's a certain expense that goes along with that. Maintaining those offices, personnel in those offices, in some instances renting those offices. And so I think we need to take a very global, statewide look at where our offices are, how close they are, and make sure they're spread out appropriately and that they're appropriate size. And as we expand these digital options, the hope is that most people won't even have to come to the driver service station. So we need larger ones in larger metro areas that people can travel to in those instances where they really need to go in and meet with somebody in person. But for the rest of it, get online and see how we can help you there. And that's why we want to use the virtual examiners. Our plan is to have a call center here in Jackson or in the Jackson metro area where we'll have virtual examiners and people set up where people can also call in. But the vision is, and it came to me when I was going through a bank line, making a deposit, and a teller popped up on the screen and was talking to me, and I don't even think she was in the building. I mean, I was literally just dropping the deposit in and talking to somebody that was somewhere else, and I thought this could be really good technology for us when it comes to driver services. So the reality is, and I go back, we want to expand our digital footprint and start realigning our physical footprint.
Well, I support you on that, and I think that's exactly the idea is as we get there are obviously going to be increases on the digital upfront costs, but when you get to a certain point, and hopefully sooner than later, you're going to cut down on the physical needs, and you know, sometimes that can be frustrating, as you said, for people in their community, but why do you need an office in a place when you're going to be doing most everything digitally? And like you said, I'm familiar with that too, where you can go to it's not even ATM, some teller name where you go to it and you can get a person, they may be in Brookhaven or Iuka, but they're taking care of your needs, whether you're in Vicksburg or Pascagoula, wherever it is. So, but I'm supportive of your endeavors, and the sooner the better on that. So
well, and let me say this, and I don't know the last time that we looked at any of our driver's license fees and what we charge. I think it's been a while, and everybody always talks about we need to try to run government like a business, and I know that's not possible, having run a business and help run government stuff. But I do think driver service is an area where it will pay for itself, and we can charge these fees to the consumers and cover the budget for driver services completely out of what we're charging for driver's license and other services that we provide, and not doing it in such a way that we're getting some windfall, but that we're actually just covering our costs and taking it off the burden of the general fund.
yeah, well, I can only speak for myself, but I would think there'd be enough other legislators that would be supportive, and you know, because we had these discussions when you were in the Senate, there were some senators, and at the time, because we didn't have the digital access, there were some senators that wanted a station in their county seat, and I get it. If you didn't have any other option, you don't want to have to drive an hour or 2 hours to go get a driver's license, but now that's going to be obviated, the need for that is, so I'm supportive of that. I do want to ask two other questions. One is, Stephen, you mentioned one of the facilities is structurally deficient, having problems with it. Tell me just a little bit more about which one that is and where it is and what's going on.
So one of our buildings at the Law Enforcement Academy in Pearl we've recently become aware of this within the past month.
Is it an old building or relatively?
It's one of the earlier structures out there, one of the earlier buildings. It's the dormitory that the female barracks are located in, along with some of the administrative offices and so forth. Apparently there's a drainage issue running through the courtyard of the facility that is causing some of the walls and so forth to wash out, and some of the windows are starting to actually push away from the building, as well as the actual brick facade and so forth. We've been working with DFA trying to get an actual estimate and engineer's assessment as to what's going on and what it's going to take to fix it. We don't have that number yet because it's so recent that they're out there doing those analysis now, but I do expect that that's going to have the potential to cause us to have to cut off access to those buildings for at least 12 months, potentially more, in order to get these items fixed.
And that relates to the multi-purpose building request that you got. Let me, this is for the commissioner, but you know, as it relates to that area, do you feel like, and this might be a tough question for you, do you feel like it's better for you to have all of your resources out there in one spot? And I'm thinking more from a safety perspective, because you got so much in that area. Or is it better, do you need to diversify a little bit as far as your, some of your operations in the metro area? And diversify, I mean, locate geographically, so that you're not limited in any capacity by having too much of your operations at one site. Or is it better? I mean, or is it more efficient to have it all at one site?
Well, and I think, in particularly, you know, we're looking at a new headquarters. And if we can get the new headquarters funded, yes, it would put everybody in a much more closer geographic area, including Malota, including Troop C that's out there, and then our headquarters, which would be very close to MEMA and the crime lab. From the standpoint as it pertains to the new headquarters, we feel that it will greatly improve the efficiency of our agency. As it stands, NBN has its own budget for human resources and legal, and so traditionally they have not utilized what DPS could offer in-house, and really I think that's the goal of DPS, is to be able to consolidate the services for these different divisions, since they are typically law enforcement divisions, and have one human resource department. And so our goal is to get back to that. In addition, I feel like having NBN, Highway Patrol, and NBI, and Homeland Security working in the same building, in the same area, we can save on things like intel analysts. They all have their own intel analysts now. Well, all those intel analysts need to be in one room gathering intel together instead of being separated out. And it'll improve communication between the different divisions. NBN will much easier be able to communicate with NBI. And so often, even in things like human trafficking, NBI will be investigating it, but there will be a drug nexus. And if they're in the same building, my hope and desire is that it'll improve those communications. Public safety and planning. I think they're paying rent of about $300,000 to $400,000 a year in their current location. If we can get them out to headquarters again, that's another savings. Now, if for some reason there was ever any sort of attack or something came down, would it be better to have some of our assets spread out? I think it would be, and I would say that with the new headquarters and what we're going to have, that will be the headquarters, but we will still have NBN offices out in other parts of the state, and we will still have troop stations in all the 9 different districts, and driver service stations throughout the state. So I think our assets will still be spread out enough to deal with that.
Final question is, you mentioned to me a while back about the death investigators, and seems like a good idea, especially if we're spending too much money on trying to get our physicians back here to testify. But I didn't ask you this earlier, but are they relatively easy to find, or is that going to be hard for you to find these people? And will it, do you think it'll offset the cost of, is it going to be kind of a wash on the cost, or maybe even a cost savings by getting those folks?
You know, right now we're paying our MEs or our pathologists $260,000 to $290,000 a year per doctor. Now, I still think ideally we have 4 MEs, 1 in South Mississippi, 1 in North Mississippi, and 2 in Central Mississippi. Where I think the death investigators are going to help is it'll help eliminate the backlog. I mean, right now, we have some autopsies reports that haven't been completed that are over 8 years old, and that's just unacceptable. And so we're going to get there. You know, it will be cheaper than hiring 8 medical examiners, and it will save us money if we can do these 9 death investigators.
And you think you can find them too? You think you can find these people? Is that going to be, because I know how hard it is to find MEs.
We can find the death investigators. Okay. You know, there's a certification course now, and the statute essentially calls coroners medical examiner investigators, and they have to go through a training in order to hold that title. They get elected, but then they've got to get that training. What I would like to do is bring in some folks that have either some nursing or EMT skills, maybe also, I mean, a lot of our law enforcement are also trained EMTs, and give them an opportunity to come in, work with the pathologists on the autopsies, learn about death investigations, and I think it'll take a little time, but it's gotten a lot of excitement in those communities as well, and I think we'll be able to fill them. And again, it'll be a cost savings. I don't know if you're familiar with this, it's one of the things that I had to look into. Our case law in this state allows for lay people to testify as to their opinion on cause of death. So a mortician from a funeral home can actually testify as to the cause of death. They just got to have the actual knowledge and some expertise in that area. And if we can get these death investigators in there and then get prosecutors comfortable with using them, again, it goes back to allowing the doctors to stay in the lab and do the jobs they need to do.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Senator Jackson.
Hello, Senator.
All right, Commissioner, how you doing?
Doing great. How you been?
Good, great.
It's always good to see you.
Yes, sir. How are you coming along with your autopsy completion? Have you
I could,
numbers down, or they about the same, or they increasing?
the number of troopers?
No, autopsies.
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 I think we're at a, sometimes you start to feel like it's one step forward, two steps back. So when I first got on, we only had 2 medical examiners, and we hired a third one, Dr. Turner, down on the coast. So for the first time in a long time, we had 3. And then recently we were reduced back down to 2. So we're trying to deal with that. We've hired a lot of contract pathologists that are trying to help us work through the backlog. I've told them to start on the oldest and let's work our way up to the front. We've also instituted a new internal procedure that says the doctors, when they perform their autopsies, they have 90 days to complete the autopsy report. And so we're thinking that that's also going to help on the backlog. I want to say, and this is just off the top of my head, we had about 800 outstanding autopsy reports that are due. So,
Do you know how many had this time last year?
I want to say that we, on average, have been getting the murder rates up. I think we've had over 500, right at 500 homicides this year. And then when you throw on top of that the number of just autopsies that are requested due to suspicious death or drug overdoses, I want to say we're around 1,200 to 1,500 a year that we get on average.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I just want to say thank you for your presentation and your diligence and knowledge. I don't want you to get too big of a head. No. But it's refreshing to have DPS in here hearing these things. I mean, you've been in there, and you know there were some of these hearings a couple years ago, particularly about driver's license, that just legislators were frustrated, and we were hearing from our constituents. So thank you for doing that, and appreciate y'all doing it. So.
Well, thank y'all very much, and thank you for the opportunity to come again. And I've got to give credit to Stephen and it was the lieutenant governor and the governor both, but Lieutenant Governor Hoseman said, you know, you need to get your leadership team around you and let them do what they do. You know, a team of 8 is the ideal number according to where I think he maybe got his MBA, and I went and looked at it, and he was exactly right. So I tried to get a team together, and having a deputy commissioner of finance has been a huge advantage for me. Keith Davis being the deputy commissioner of external operations, Colonel Ginn, allowing them to go and do their jobs has been allowed me to focus on the big picture. And so I'd like to thank Stephen and all the folks on my leadership team that have really allowed us to focus on moving the agency forward.
Thank you. I have a motion, rise and report. Rise and report. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank y'all.
Thank you.